Let's see. All right, yeah, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. If you don't know, I'm Shanika Ward. I serve on the board with Bdpa Atlanta. If this is your first Bdpa Atlanta meeting, welcome. We've been hosting our at least our monthly series by thanks to Matrix. Pretty much, well, definitely all this year and a good bit of last year too. So thank you, JV, for keeping this going with us. For those that are new to Bdpa Atlanta, sorry, I'm hearing an echo. So Bdpa Atlanta is a nonprofit membership organization. So we are all about exposure, kind of exposing our members to various technologies and then other avenues. So professional development, ways to grow in, technical careers, so potential fields to jump into. Our motto is advancing careers from the classroom to the boardroom. So I guess the bottom line for Bdpa is kind of bridging the gap between, bridging the gap between people and in different the technology field. So just the goal is to have equity with the group that we're reaching out to. So for more background on Bdpa, so we're more focused on, like STEM. So in college, for college, we don't have too much of a, membership that we're going now. We're still trying to develop that. I know, like locally, we've been reaching out to Georgia State, but maybe after things kind of open up a bit more, that we'll be able to kind of continue those relationships a bit. With working professionals, we host a monthly series, which I kind of was mentioning earlier. Each month, on the third Wednesday of the month, we have a session, and that's open to just computer science graduates, other STEM professionals, and entrepreneurs to come out. And then our biggest program is the K through 12 STEM program that we have that recently wrapped up. I think around August it wrapped up. So from January to about August, we're introducing students to various STEM concepts and introduction to computer science, where they get a chance to learn application development, to play around with, depending on the instructors that we have, they get to play around with HTML, JavaScript, MySQL, and that. And hopefully with that, they get exposure to like us, like the different instructors that are helping out, and then other companies. So State Farm is a big sponsor that kind of helps with one, like helping us have Zoom to help have a avenue to teach the students, or continue to teach the students during the pandemic, and the Dunwoody office when we used to meet in person. I think with that, I'll hand it over to John to introduce our speaker for tonight. So,
sure thing. Yeah, happy to. And as always, you're being a little bit humble. And so not that long ago, there's 30 chapters of, again, those of you that are new to this meeting, there's 30 chapters in Bdpa across the country. And this year, the Atlanta Bdpa chapter won the chapter of the year. And a lot of that had to do with work that Victor, who was on and off, hopefully he'll come back to the meeting here shortly, but Victor and Shanika and the STEM work that they do with kids and everything that Shanika was describing. So yeah, it's been a great partnership for us, and we're happy to align, pertinent topics on a monthly basis. So and this is a great one tonight. So I think the project to product, if that's not already happening within your company and within your enterprise, it's gonna. And I'm sure it's probably already, on the way, and that transformation effort is in the midst of everyone's lives. So we have a great speaker, Emily Clay from the Home Depot, So a couple of weeks ago during the World Series, there were, during some of the games, there'd be hey, today we all wear blue for the Braves. Well, tonight I put on my orange shirt for Home Depot tonight. So go Big Orange, right? So Emily's been at Home Depot for well over 20 years. She started as a project manager, and for 6+ years now, she's been in the product space at Home Depot. And just this will be a great session. Look forward to hearing about some of the things that Home Depot is going through, some of the things that you need to be aware of during this transformational effort, and also from an individual's perspective too. If you're calling in, listening to this, thinking, well, how do I reskill myself and be ready for this type of transformation? So a lot of good stuff ahead of us tonight. So Emily, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and very grateful. So welcome.
Thank you, John. I'm excited to be here, and I do appreciate the invite very much, because I think it's great to meet other people throughout Atlanta and elsewhere, and how can we all share our experiences together and figure out how we all make things better together. So I'm happy to be here. I thought I would just, quickly, and I don't have my orange, but I have it in the background. Just give you guys a quick overview of my career, and then really kind of talk through some of the things of why is this happening, why the change, what are the benefits, and how can you think about your career and skill set differently. So as John said, I've actually been with Home Depot now almost 24 years. I started at the store here in Atlanta, the flagship store across the street from the corporate office. Catching shoplifters was my job. And it was one of those things where I really wanted to work for Home Depot, but wasn't too sure that was the right role for me. And clearly it wasn't, because I only did that role for about 6 months, and then went over to work in the corporate office in loss prevention. So I worked as a project manager in loss prevention, and then did a lot of things within that area for almost 10 years. Then went back out to run store operations for the Mid-South region. So again, very, very driven by, process and being an operator. From there, it was right when we were getting into that interconnected retail. So how do you connect the stores with online? So I went to online as a product manager, but it was still in a very project world. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little later too, but I learned a lot about the differences between the two. Did a quick stint at the online call center. Again, not necessarily a position of choice, but definitely a great experience. I ran a call center of about 900 people. And then I got a call one day from one of our engineering leaders, and said, hey, we're going to start up formally product management in the organization, and we think you would be a great fit. And my first reaction was, I don't know anything about engineering, so I don't know that that's a wise choice. But, she convinced me that I needed to think more about skill set and how we think about the customer, and that it might be actually a good fit for me. And I've been doing it now for almost 5 years. So I help set up product management in our store systems. So anything inside the orange box. And most recently now, I am running enterprise product management, which is in everything but online when it comes to how you think about product management. I own product principles, and then I also have some balanced teams on the payments and tech enablement space. So a lot of different opportunities throughout my career with the Home Depot. A little bit about me on the personal side. I grew up in Ohio, so I'm not native to Georgia, but I've been here for almost 30 years. I am married, and I have a son who is college age that I'm trying to push him towards a technology degree. So he's fighting me a little bit, but eventually I'm hoping I can get him there. And I'm also a board member of WIT, which is Women in Technology. So very similar in how we are trying to, close the DE&I wage gap for women, focused on STEAM careers. So I think this is a great connection point of how we kind of bring this all together. So again, excited to be here tonight. Well, you know, they gave me a list of questions, but certainly if you want to ask something as I kind of talk through some things, please feel free to, you know, interrupt me, raise your hand, what have you. But, you know, one of the key questions is why is this happening? And if you had asked me 10 years ago, I don't know that I would have the same answer that I have today, but I think about, you know, one of our leaders said that, you know, the pace of change, especially for retail, is going to be greater in the next 5 years than it was in the past, probably 20 to 50 years. And that pace of change is really what's driving, in my mind, the change in how we think about things and how we do things differently. And while project management is still important, and we still have project managers, it is how do we react and continue to be innovative and think through things a little bit differently? How can we be more disruptive? And I think that's where you blend project and product. Innovation is going to be key over the next, you know, or actually just any time. Innovation is really, really important. And I think there's definitely differences between the two that, you know, project is more defined. You might have, you're opening a building, you have a hard deadline you have to hit, and you still need that project management oversight. But if you want to be disruptive in a market, product management will then help you test and learn. It'll help you experiment on things. It's just a slightly different way of thinking, but how do you combine the two? Or how do you, from a career perspective, if you want to go from project to product, what are those different things? So that's kind of how I think about why this is happening. When I think about what's beneficial about it, to me, the biggest difference, so this is where I will give you some of my experience in online. When I joined online, my role was to try and work through buy online, pick up in store, buy online, ship to store, all the B words, buy online, return in store, buy online, ship from store. And when I came into that role, it was all about hit this date and here's your budget. And it really wasn't about the customer. And so coming from the stores, I had this, you know, I had this idea that I'm going to make these programs 100% perfect, because I had been the recipient of technology in the stores, and it never, there were always things that it was missing. And I tended to be a vocal person. So I kind of feel like that was part of my karma of being put in .com, is I was not going to roll out anything to the stores or to our customers that wasn't perfect. And so we sat in a room for the first one, almost 4 months, and wrote a 600-page document on everything we wanted for buy online, pick up in store. And I handed it over to engineering, and then the engineering leader came back to me and said, well, this is great, but you only have 1 year and your budget's $3 million, and what you asked for is $20 million. So what are you going to cut? And that was really, really hard for me as a, you know, former store associate, wanting to make sure I had the best customer experience. It was really, really difficult. You know, I don't want to cut anything. I want it to be perfect. So really trying to understand, how do you evolve from the, here's the project and the timeline and the deadlines, because what we were measured on was, did you hit the date and did you come in on budget? It wasn't about the customer experience. It wasn't about, did it provide value? It wasn't, did you get adoption? It was those two metrics. And so while that's great, if you think about an organization or a company, how do you want to grow your business and take market share? Hitting timelines and budgets is not going to grow market share. That might be a measure of success, but it's not going to, you know, get you from point A to point B. And you think about, you know, disrupting companies like Netflix. You know, they were focused on the customer. They were focused on what the customer wanted. And, you know, Blockbuster was the recipient of their, you know, maniacal focus on that customer experience. So I think that's where I feel like we made that shift to go, hey, while this is great, how do we get better at de-risking? How do we get better at validating that our solutions work? How do we get better at understanding what the customer needs and making sure that we're not delivering software that hits a timeline and a budget? And that's, to me, why we've made this shift from project to product. and why it's important. You know, again, an organization our size, it would sometimes take us 1 to 3 years to launch something into our stores. You can't wait 1 to 3 years now for anything. I mean, people want stuff, you know, think of Amazon. Amazon's trained us that I want it now. And so how do you as an individual think through, how can I deliver small incremental pieces to add value? Even though it still might take you 1 to 3 years to get to your end game, if you can deliver that value along the way, you can test it, you can measure it, you can get feedback and know that you're on the right track. So I think to me, that's another reason why, you know, product management is a beneficial change in a way of thinking that is different than where we were before. One of the best approaches, so how to best approach this as an organization. Agile is a word that, you know, it's like a buzzword. Product is a buzzword. Agile is a buzzword. You know, think about how your organization works or how you work as an individual and test and learn your way into anything. I think that's how you kind of change your mindset into how you approach this, whether it's your personal skill set, whether it's your company. What I have found is that one size does not fit all. You know, we originally, as part of our transformation, you know, we went from a waterfall shop to, they tried to go from waterfall to extreme programming. And extreme programming is really cool, but it really only works if there's no dependencies. And in our organization, we've got a lot of, you know, we've got a lot of legacy systems. We have, you know, new systems as well. And so we had to really kind of take that step back and go, hey, XP works great for people who are independent. For teams that are not independent, let's use a different kind of methodology. You know, we use Scrum in some cases. We use SAFe kind of methodology in our planning. So we actually took bits and pieces of different frameworks and kind of have put them together over the years to make it work for us. And how we did that was kind of, again, using that agile methodology of test and learning and figuring out what works best for everybody in the organization. One of the things that we found too is that, you know, I know this is about project to product. We still have project managers in certain instances. If we've got a large initiative that, like opening a supply chain building or something of that nature, we still have project management oversight. I do think that it's great. A lot of our project managers have made that transition to product based on their skill sets, their career desires, and things like that. So it is definitely a career pathing opportunity within the Home Depot. And I think it's pretty cool that you can go either way. There's lots of different opportunities, again, based on your skill set. I think
Emily,
that
Emily,
yes.
can I ask on that progression from a project manager to a product manager, how is that viewed? Is that viewed as a promotion, or is it more of a lateral type of move, or does it kind of depend?
So it does kind of depend. And so it, you know, for us, we have different levels of product managers. We have an entry level role, we have product, senior product, and then principal, and then our leadership group. On the project managers are typically more of that analyst role. So they tend to be more in line with that entry level product manager. And so if you're going from a project manager to product, it is considered a promotional opportunity. So there's some lateral and some promotional. It just depends on the level. When you get into the leadership levels, it is very similar, you know, from our size and scope. Sometimes the benefits are slightly different because we do look at skill sets and are looking for folks that either have a certification from General Assembly or have SAFe certification. There's different certifications other than PMP that we look for that might put you in a different categorization in the leadership level.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about how we think about the difference between project and product?
Hi, this is Danny. I think you might will cover later. I'm new to the product management area, so I'm more just in the project management area. So I'm still not very clear about just what is the fundamental difference between project management and a product management.
So I think, this is somewhat of a generalization, but I'll also give you kind of how we operate in Home Depot. So in Home Depot, we have product managers typically work on a balanced team. So there's a product manager, a UXer, and then 6 to 8 engineers, and they are responsible for a product or a domain space within a product. Yeah. So for example, I own payments. So I have a payments team that's responsible for the interface on payments used at our point of sale. There are, like, our common authorization service is a domain team within payments, our booking team. And so I have a product manager in each one of those spaces. They are responsible for the product strategy within that. So they translate the business strategy into product strategy. They write all the user stories. They do all the research along with their UX partner to understand what the user is, expects or needs. They also are responsible for value. So in my payment space, one of our big pieces of value is how do we reduce the cost of transactions? And so they are always looking for different ways, whether it's through error messaging or improving the data that's flowing between us and let's say Citibank. So they are responsible for the value that they deliver within their space. They're responsible for the roadmaps and the outcomes that they're going after. Our project manager, we actually have a project manager in that space, but we have one project manager over all of payments, where I have 15 product managers that are managing those different teams or working on the balance teams. That project manager really tries to ensure that the holistic view is on track. They do somewhat of a delivery manager role as well. Status updates, financials, and making sure that our leadership understands what's kind of planned out for each quarter based on what the teams are providing. So it is a little bit different in the role, and there's different levels, but it's like a one-to-many on the project, where the product is one-to-one on the balance team.
I think I have a question as well.
Sure.
I'm not sure if it's a question or whether I'm going to pontificate here or not. Let me be careful what I do. So I'm currently on a project with Ernst & Young at a company called Edward Jones, a securities company, and they are in the process. The group that I'm with is transitioning. The group that I'm supporting, and I'm in a metadata data governance role there, is transitioning from project management to product management. And what I've observed is that, first of all, they're like deers in headlights, right? It's a little different than what you just described, in that it was a company mandate that people in this role migrate to the product management role, right? And so my question is, I'm thinking, as I think about the difference between product manager and project manager, what pops into my head first is entrepreneurial things like do you understand the value proposition? Do you understand use cases? Do you think about it along those lines? Or is it just a matter of, we got this particular task to do, let's make sure that it's done at that time, without thinking entrepreneurially, in my opinion, along the lines of, who are my customers as I deliver this stuff to the marketplace? Where can I provide the best value? How do I target that? How do I combine that with low-hanging fruit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So it just seems like it's a difference between somebody who's a Microsoft project maven, who can get deep into that, or a Kanban maven, to somebody who's really thinking, empathizing with the customer, empathizing with the market, what the market trends are, and then trying to keep up with or get ahead of that, right? Is that entrepreneurial keyword a difference or no?
I mean, I like to say
Yeah.
that empowerment to me is something that, if you read anything on Marty Kagan's books or the Silicon Valley Product Group, empowerment of product is really important. I would say, I would like to think Home Depot is good at empowering our product managers to make decisions based on the customer and on value, and they prioritize accordingly. They are allowed to say no to things. So I do think that's important on the product role, to own your space and to think with that customer in mind. I think for us, project management is really more of those tactical execution items, even so far as setting up test environments, test cases. It is more of a tactical list of things to do than it is owning your space, prioritizing a backlog based on what the customer or the trends that you're seeing. And that to me is somewhat of that delineation for sure.
All right, thank you.
Emily, you were touching on some of the certifications, and it's always kind of a hot button in these meetings because people are, they're trying to better themselves and build skills. What do you think, some of the key certifications, you mentioned SAFE and some other things, like what do you guys like to see in your enterprise there? And do you think that it's kind of that's common across the market as well, or is it specific to Home Depot?
No, I think it is somewhat common. I think for me, when it is hard when you're looking at resumes and trying to figure out what that person's background is, because of the fact that people call themselves product, even though they may be a program manager or they may have been a project manager. So I look for some of those things to see if they've just had continuous learning. So it's certainly not a requirement by any stretch, but I think SAFE certification, even though I'm not a super fan of SAFE because SAFE is not kind of anchored in value or customer back thinking, it is a good methodology just to understand from a large organization how you would prioritize and plan work. Agile at scale is good. I'm looking for continuous learning on what you're trying to do to personally grow yourself, because there aren't certifications in product management. There's no 4-year degree that I've been able to find in product management. And so those are some of the technical skills that I would look for if you've never been a product manager and you're looking to make that jump. One of the core things to me, and some of the challenges that we've had with folks, just from a competency perspective, making that jump, is that really, really good project managers do struggle in a product role when it comes to ambiguity. And that's, to me, if you're curious, if you like to solve problems in a way where there's ambiguity around that problem, that you can go try and understand, let me define the problem. What's the outcome I'm going for? How might I test something? How can I kind of wrap my arms around that? That's some of the core competencies that I'm looking for in a good product manager. And that tends to be a challenge sometimes for folks in the project management world, because they're used to, here's the date we need to hit, here's the financials we need to hit, now make sure we hit it. And it's not ambiguous. It is what it is. And so that tends to be the big differentiator in my mind. And I think having some of those certifications can just help you think differently and get your mindset out of, how can I, for me personally, my biggest challenge from moving out of an operator role into product was really getting away from solutioning. I was really, really good at solutions because I had a store background and I was an operator. And if I wasn't making sales or I had a markdown problem, I knew how to solve that. So I would go right to solutioning. A good product manager does not solution anything. They go in and they force the problem understanding. They force assumptions. They force, that customer back thinking to then determine what solutions am I going to go test. My second skill set that was really tough for me to learn personally was experimentation. Experimentation was really easy and online, because online I can do A/B testing. I can do some really easy things, moving buttons, colors, etc. Didn't cost a lot to do it. And it was easy to know immediately if it was making an impact. If I'm going to design a new customer interface for the stores, testing for me needs to be something where I don't use any development. I use a piece of paper and a pen, or I show a prototype, or I fake something to a customer behind the scenes. And so an example, we were looking at when we were moving to our new self-checkout. Our old self-checkout had a system that had a cashier notification center, and it would tell the cashier if somebody needed help. So the cashier would stand there and just watch for where a customer needed help. We were designing our new system, so because we didn't want the cashier standing behind that podium, we wanted them out helping the customer. And so we were trying to figure out, well, how can we notify them if a customer needs help? And so immediately it was like, let's put a light on the top of the self-checkout. And so my team said, nope, we bought these crazy wristbands from Amazon. We went to 2 stores. We had the associates wear the wristband, and my team stood and hid behind the self-checkout. And anytime a customer got stuck, they would hit a button that would zap the wristband to see if that solution would work better than the lights. And it didn't. So, good news is we spent about $50. Bad news is our assumption was wrong. And so, then we tested a bunch of different things, but testing for us was really a challenge. Because the idea was the challenge was, I'm not going to give you any development resources to test. Can you do it? So we had to get super, super creative. And that's that ambiguity of what is the solution, because I could immediately have gone to, yep, let's put a light on top of everything and everything will be fine. Well, interestingly enough, the first light we tested didn't work either, because it was too high and it was the wrong color. So having those kind of test and learn opportunities was really cool. And we had probably 4 failed tests in that until we got the right solution that gave the customer immediate support when they needed help at self-checkout, allowed our associates to better serve our customers, and provide them, with that confidence that when the solution went off, they knew where to go. So
that's awesome.
I just want to say that was very helpful, because in describing the experimentation, it starts to help me think differently about, well, it just sounds as if when you're a product manager, that you're just running an agile scrum. But the truth be told, there's a little bit more to it, one of them being experimentation. So that definitely shed some light for me. Thank you.
Yep. There's a really good book. It's called Experimentation Works. And that's one that we've used to, have our teams read them, because it does go into more than just that online experimentation and try and force that muscle. That is not an easy muscle. And the other thing too is there's a huge change management element in that I don't know about everyone's organizations here, but even from a personal perspective, there is a stigma of failure when it comes to, experimentation, and people don't want to fail. I don't want to go tell my boss, hey, I experimented on this and it failed, because it doesn't feel good. So we actually changed how we talk about experiments. We talk about, what do we learn? So we don't necessarily say that it failed, but we say, hey, we did this experiment. We learned a lot, and now our solution, we're moving towards a different solution instead of saying that this experiment failed. But it really is a mindset shift in that it is okay to fail. You can look at a number of organizations. Amazon fails a ton. Think about, now, you don't want to get to the point of the Amazon phone and realize that you failed. And so how do we do that in a way that is positive and is accepted? I had one, this was when I first started in product. And so I was learning. And we weren't not yet at the forcing the no development on experimentation. So I had a team, and we did tend to still go a little bit more towards solutioning. And it was about allowing customers to start their return online. And this was, 6 years ago. So we knew that in order for this to be of value, we needed so many customers to adopt this every week. And part of our goal was to reduce the costs of, the labor in store and, potentially shipping costs. So we had a really good value target associated with allowing customers to start their returns online. And we decided we would build a very thin slice. So it was, if you had a single vendor item, simple return, and we spent about $200,000 on building. And we launched it just to watch it, to decide, do we want to then, allow any customer to start their return online, and what that would be. And, again, long time ago, let's say we needed, one customer per day to do it, to know that it was valuable to our customers, and we would hit the value benefits that we were targeting. Well, we only had maybe one per month. So we decided, we'll leave that on, no harm, no foul. Customers could still use that benefit if it was within that kind of realm of the single vendor item, very simple order. And we just didn't expand it. And I'll never forget, I went to one of my leaders and I said, hey, we're not going to move forward with this. We did spend $200,000. And his reaction was, you just wasted $200,000 to tell me it didn't work. And I said, actually, I saved you $3 million, because the original estimate to do the entire returns online was 3.2 million. And so I just saved you 3 million, and you can go do something else. So it is about how you talk about what you're doing, because had we spent 3.2 to build something that customers didn't want, that's even worse. So yeah, I spent money. I've learned now how to experiment a lot cheaper. But that's the kind of conversations you have to have with your leadership to get them to see the value of experimentation, and making sure that you are, providing what the customer or your associate or even your company needs in order for it to provide the value that you're targeting.
So I'm thinking then perhaps having a good project manager that can agree on the sum of the experimentation value, to say, well, here's the budget for experimentation, use it as you see fit. I think having a buy-in, it sounds to me that having a buy-in from financials, the financial aspect of it, is also important. And so that the product manager can be free to take the necessary steps to deliver the right product. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say now in our organization, that was years ago, I would say we empower the product managers to do those experiments. Again, we've learned a lot on how to do them where it doesn't cost, there's no development. We try and do them now where there's almost zero development dollars. Yes, there may be some labor dollars for the product or the UXer to do that, but we empower them to go do it. We try and, we fund products now. We don't fund projects. And so that may be the nuance a little bit, in that, you have your budget for the year, you have target deliverables, and how are you hitting those target deliverables based on what are you experimenting? What value are you targeting to make sure that you hit it? Because we don't want to make it a negative where they stop experimenting. But empowerment is a big deal. I think that's still, some of the other things that we do, we have dev games. We do some different things to try and create or spark creativity and experimentation outside of their day jobs, because that is such a challenging, a challenging opportunity to try and get people to be innovative. And so sometimes that's another way that we try and go about being innovative in the space, is by having these hackathons or dev game opportunities as well. So think one of the other questions that they had sent me was, and I think this kind of ties in a little bit to some of the questions you guys have been asking me, is how can you retool your own skill set? And so we talked a little bit about some of those certifications and things like that, but there is a ton of different things out there. There's General Assembly that has some great product management classes and workshops. There's, Marty Kagan and the Silicon Valley Product Group is a blog that I follow just because they are constantly updating and talking about things. I would say he's a little bit to one side of the purist when it comes to product management. I think Home Depot is kind of a little more in the middle. His information is great to kind of get us to think differently. We have to have a little bit of a blend when it comes to kind of some of those processes. I think reading, there's so many blogs and there's industry groups. There is the industry, which is a product organization. Anything you can do to read about how product managers think, what are the technical skills required, what are the soft skills required. So I talked a little bit about ambiguity, influencing others, having courage. Courage is really important because as a product manager, you are responsible for your team and you have to be able to say no. You have to be able to prioritize. You might have 5 people asking for capacity from your team, and you have to be able to figure out what's, number 1 through 5, what's going to add the most value and where is your capacity line. And so courage is really important to speak up and to be that owner. I think from a skill set perspective, a lot of translatable skills from project for sure. Organizational skills, communication skills, the ability to multitask. Some of those things are super translatable to product management for sure. And I think are very much make product management individuals better if they have some of that project background. So that's just some of the things that I think about when I think about skill sets.
Emily, do you have product managers, and then do you also have product owners?
We do not. We only have
okay.
Product managers. Now we leverage our business partners as kind of that. I wouldn't even call them product owners, but for example, for us in store operator, let's take payments since I own payments. I have my business leaders in payments who are trying to focus on the strategy around payments. How do we grow our private label credit card? How do we think about taking payment? And then my team translates their overall strategy into the product roadmap and strategy as it relates to technology for payments. So they might say, for example, I talked about earlier, how do we grow private label signups in the store? Their problem to solve is how do I improve that rate? So then my team will take that and figure out how do we add it to self-checkout? How do we add it to the checkout flow? How do we get more people approved while they're in the stores? So they'll translate that into a product strategy and then measure against how many applications we need to have in order to hit those targets. I think one of the other questions that came up was also around how do you influence leaders? And so again, this one to me is just all around the customer. So if you talk in terms of the customer and what the customer is looking for, and you back that up by data, it's actually very easy to influence your leaders. For us, our leaders are great because we have one of our company tenants is the inverted pyramid. So it starts with our customers, then it goes to our frontline associates, then our field leaders, then our corporate office, and then our executive team. And so, if we go and do our research and talk about what our associates need, what our customers need, COVID was a great example. We had to pivot very quickly during COVID. in things that we never would have thought we would ever have to do. So things like not allowing more than 100 people in a store. So we built a quick counter. We reassigned people to stand at the door, and they counted how many customers came in and how many customers went out so that we could at least track that information. We also lit up curbside pickup in probably the fastest we've ever delivered anything as an organization. And I think we delivered it in like 2 weeks. So it was, really impressive of how the team came together. I don't know that we could have done that in our waterfall world. I think, our ability to think differently, our ability to think customer back, our ability to pivot quickly is a result of how we've kind of changed how we think about building software. The other thing too, one other thing that I think is really important is don't underestimate the impact of change management. Change management is really important. Clear understanding of what project versus product really is in your organization. We've worked really hard to, really define those job descriptions and roles and responsibilities so that people are clear on what the differences are and why they're important and what the skill sets are needed in both. Moving from that solution space to the problem space, a lot of times, at least in, I think in a lot of organizations, we still focus on, hey, go build this thing versus what is the customer problem we're solving. And so that mindset shift is important, and that goes into that change management. And then, data, I talk about data, and data seems like a really easy thing to do, but how do you baseline your data? How do you measure against your data? How do you know you're successful? I think is also slightly different in a product world versus a project world. In project, it is timelines and dates. In a product world is what is the outcome you're going after, and did you achieve that outcome? Well, how do you measure the outcome baseline? That can be very different than a project timeline. So, and then just thinking about how do you think about continuous improvement? For us, and I know, I guess, again, for me personally, is I am always trying to read and learn and look at different ways of doing things, because certainly from a technology perspective, things are ever evolving, and trying to stay on top of different technology, different ways of working, and just trying things, meeting with different people, learning what they're doing, and seeing if it'll work in our organization is really fun, because Home Depot allows us that flexibility. But how can you as an individual, try, find a new technique, learn something new, and implement it in your space? And again, that goes back to test and learn. Did it work? Great. Can we scale it? What would it take to scale? If it didn't work, okay, let's try something different. So continuous improvement, I think, is also part of that change management, and getting people to think about how do we break problem spaces down. We may know the end goal, but how are you going to get there in incremental ways so that we're delivering that value instead of having to wait till the end to get that. So I think overall, that's kind of my highlights between project and product. Certainly open to any additional questions you guys might have.
What was the name of the book again? It was
Yep, it's called Experimentation Works.
Experimentation.
It's by Stephen Tomke, I think is the author. And then there's also Empowered and Inspired by Marty Cagan.
That was the blog.
Yep, but he also has 2 books as well.
Okay.
Emily, I have a question. I was curious how, when a company obviously moves from a waterfall methodology into more of an agile form of, implementing different principles, how did Home Depot align with your funding model? Because historically speaking, in a waterfall environment, you do annual funding and you have certain allocation of budget for the year, which ultimately allows each leader to determine what they're going to spend for each project. How did this shift at Home Depot translate with your funding model? And is that still an area that Home Depot is looking to somewhat modify or change?
We pretty much move from project to product funding. And that has worked well for us because, you know, from a product perspective, your product should live on until you sunset it. And so therefore that funding model is working pretty well. Any other questions?
I was curious, like for the experimentation, does that mean you're also partnering with like the user experience researchers, or is it all on the product manager to come up with ideas and experiments and all that?
Oh no, it's definitely a partnership with UX. So our UX, typically our product managers and UX, our product managers and we call them UXers. They work hand in hand to come up with, you know, what the research plan is going to be, how the experiment's going to run. They might even build the wireframes, or even, you know, some of our experiments are take a piece of paper and we give associates, I don't even know what I would equate it to from a game perspective, but we give them a piece of paper and we give them the like on a receipt. We'll take all the elements of a receipt and we'll give it to them in a puzzle piece and then say, hey, lay this out how it makes the most sense to you. And we see what they do. And again, that's an experiment because we can sit in our office all day long and design what a receipt should look like. But if you're looking at an associate who's looking at returns receipts every single day, let's build it so it's easiest for them to process that return so that customer gets through the line quickest. So absolutely, UX is definitely a partner in this along the way.
I have to say, whoever did the experimenting with the self-checkout, like, I don't know, at the Home Depot I go to, I love the you know, the gun, the laser gun to scan the screen, like everything. It has like a very good user feel about it. So yeah, well done on that. And then I love I did it once or twice when things were more in a lockdown, the use of like the lockers where you order and then come in and pick up, you know, right out of the locker or whatever. That was pretty cool too.
Yeah. We're always looking for different ways to make that experience better. And so lockers was one of those a little bit more expensive tests, but definitely, you know, as a result, we have them, I think, in every store now.
You know, the key to a good, successful self-checkout is when the customer enjoys the equipment they're using to process it, and they don't even notice certain things that when the associate needs to come to them, that they have to sit and wait. I frequent the Home Depot close to my house. My house sits in between two different Home Depot locations, so I kind of pick between the two. But I was recently at Kroger and I had to wait for the self-checkout gentleman to come. I had to kind of wave my hand and wait in line. He had two other customers he was assisting, and it was definitely something that stood out to me, that it was a little bit of an inconvenience, and I've never even once noticed that at a Home Depot. So what ended up final solution experiment you were doing with the light and the bracelet? What did you guys end up what ended up being the solution for that?
We ended up doing the light, but at a much lower, it was a larger screen and it was lower in height than what they had originally.
Yeah. I never even noticed it when I was there. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that cool story.
It was challenging because everybody's like, they need a wearable. They don't need a wearable. We want a tablet. We want a light, you know? So it was like, well, that's a solution, but let's figure out what's the easiest thing for the associate. For sure.
So I used to do a little bit of flipping, and I used to go to a particular Home Depot. This one is on the one on Cascade, and it seems like, and this was at the beginning. This was the year prior to COVID, and then maybe I don't know, maybe it overlapped COVID 3 or 4 months before I closed out that flip. Right. Now, it seemed to me that, yeah, some of the changes you guys implemented were useful, But there were some things that seemed like they were unique to that particular store, like calling and being on hold for 45 minutes, calling or being on hold for 45 minutes and then having the phone go dead, putting something on will call, then sending a contractor there on multiple occasions, paying them for their time, only to get them to will call, and the items that should have been there are not there. So I don't mean to comply, but I'm just wondering, just observing that as in a different role than my IT role as a flipper. I was just wondering how you get that kind of feedback, that customer feedback, into the loop. And then what do you do? And then what do you do about it if that feedback stays at the store level and never makes it to, your desk?
Yeah, that's a great comment, because I would say listening channels are really important to us. And I think that is one cool thing about our product organization, is that when you think about more technology driven companies, their listening channels are very limited, to surveys or traffic, tagging things on their website, where we have 450,000 associates that have no problem giving us feedback. And then from a customer perspective, we have our voice of the customer survey, which is at the bottom of every receipt. And then if you call our call center, we have a survey. I mean, we have all kinds of ways for you to provide us feedback. And we look at all of that stuff. I mean, it is, we live and die by the customer surveys, and we get reports that give us by store, by type, it'll aggregate the data. There's so much data, and it's just wonderful because it tells us, hey, wait times for this type of thing is too long. So then the team goes, hey, that's a problem we need to go solve. Or, hey, this item isn't selling or not available. We're getting customer complaints that they're ordering it and it's not available. So then they'll go look at the inventory levels, or is the item, what happened? And so, our listening channels are really great. So I would just say, anytime you're in a store and you shop with us, please fill out that survey, because again, stores actually get recognized for positive surveys, and we take the constructive feedback as well to figure out how can we improve our customer experience.
Well, that certainly is good advice. And my mistake, I suspect, was that I kept my comments at the store manager level, and that can be a bottleneck, rather than going to corporate and filling out your survey or going around the store. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And I could certainly say, our store managers are empowered to then provide us that feedback too. So they have a mechanism where they can submit that as well. I think the customer survey is just a great way to aggregate data across many, many stores.
Gotcha.
So again, it gives you hey, was it a one-time occurrence, and it just might have been, we didn't do a great job on the customer side, or is this truly a problem because we're now seeing it across multiple stores in multiple areas?
And a follow-up, but a very different question. Does Home Depot leverage metadata? It's very selfish. I'm a metadata guy, so I'm just curious how much data about the data is a critical input to what you do.
That's a great question that I honestly do not know the answer to.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. No problem.
I would just like to follow up on the flippers comment, if you don't mind me calling you that, sir.
Sure. I'll put I'm not sure. I can distribute my phone number. It's no problem. If you like, you want me to put it in the chat? I'll speak
my
it,
thought was
whatever.
So actually, no, my thought was a bit of a defense to Home Depot, who I think offers a tremendous service, by the way.
Right.
I think it's safe to say that no two stores are created equal.
Absolutely, I agree.
And by that, I don't mean that in a negative way. I think, in my opinion, what happens is that the store reflects the demographics.
Sadly, I think you're right.
I live in Decatur.
Yeah, yep.
And my Wesley Chapel store does not offer products.
I hear
I'm at work.
That cascade.
At the
I already know.
Yes.
I'm a flipper like you. I already know. We don't want to. We don't want to hijack the conversation, but yeah, right. I get where you're going with this.
That's why we have buy online, ship to store, or ship to your job site.
Yeah.
But in contributing to this discussion, though, I think developing products and your question about metadata, I think there's just really no way that you can develop products without strong data and metadata. And
that would be my argument, but it's a selfish argument. I'm a proponent of metadata and how you can leverage it to, corporate advantage, but it's a misunderstood area, and therefore is not really leveraged. Even in high-tech solutions and smart solutions like the one that Emily is describing, I suspect that in many cases that metadata opportunity is not leveraged to its maximum advantage. And
well, I think the thought might be there is similarly, you have agile, and I myself, I don't mean to hijack the conversation,
right?
But even though you may have agile methodologies, there are different aspects of it that people will create hybrids. So it's not you must do this, otherwise you're not doing product management. You must do this, otherwise you're not doing agile. I think organizations or individual product groups or teams simply adapt what they believe is best to have their, the best outcome. That's
and that's maturity. I mean, if you're building a bridge or an airplane and you want to do that via agile and the bridge fault, and you're doing continuous development, you're moving at agile speed to do something that is well-defined and where you can't make a mistake, where the experimentation might be disastrous, then that may be a much more waterfall-oriented project, right? So so it's good that we've matured to the place where we understand that, as Emily was saying, that one size does not fit all, and you come up with hybrids, you come up with experiments and ideas about how to leverage the methodologies and your resources in ways that may not be traditional, but may be perfect for the current marketplace and for what you're doing. So I hear you. And let's not hijack the conversation.
Now, this is all good conversation for sure.
Yeah.
George, we'll let you hijack the conversation as long as we can come over and have some of that gray goose behind you.
Okay.
I was thinking that same thing. I need to be at George's house.
And John, I was thinking that I'd probably want to volunteer to do a metadata conversation, though it's such a niche thing. I don't know. I don't know. We'll talk. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment and say this is my first meeting that I have attended, rather, and I must say that I'm definitely intrigued. I sincerely appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to share this valuable information. It was very insightful, and I myself, I have to say that I am most appreciative. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very
and certainly
good.
Here's my plug, homedepot.com/careers.
Oh, you don't need to plug anything. We're addicts. So we don't have much. Well, I don't have much of a choice. Yeah.
Are there any, I know Victor wanted to make sure that you had, the floor for that. Like if there's any, any specific roles you're trying to fill to mention it, who knows, someone might have a referral for you or whatever. Yep. Feel free.
Yep. So, again, we do have a lot of opportunities in product and project management and delivery management as well. So all of our roles are posted on homedepot.com/careers. But certainly, you can connect with me on LinkedIn if you have a question, or I can help get you to at least the right recruiting person. I'm happy to do that.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. keep you in mind. I've lived in Atlanta off and on for many a year, but I've rarely worked in an Atlanta company where I worked in Atlanta. I was always on a plane going somewhere.
Yep.
So it would be nice to work at an Atlanta-based company for a minute. Yeah.
And we are doing a lot more of our roles remote, so that's also helpful.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And Emily, that is a great thing that Home Depot decided to make that decision, because there's, the space that we're in and just helping companies identify talent. That's definitely been a significant challenge for companies that have required people to come into the office.
Yep.
They're not able to capture the talent right now. And it may not be that way forever, but for now, that's what we're seeing. So I think it's great that Home Depot made that decision.
Yep, me too.
Oh, yes. And you benefit from that too, don't you?
Absolutely. Although I do like to go to the office every once in a while because I miss
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And you do have a really pretty office, and great people. So I'm sure you miss your teams, but
I do for sure.
well, thank you for joining us, Emily. We really
You're welcome.
appreciate all of your input and your insight. It was really valuable information, and it was a pleasure having you. And we just really want to thank you again for participating tonight.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the time, and looking forward to connecting with you guys. I think it was a good conversation.
Emily, I have
Yes.
one really weird left field question for you.
Sure.
There's an old friend of mine who used to run a restaurant in Buckhead called Pasta Vino, great little Italian restaurant. His dad ran a restaurant across the street. It was in Peachtree Battle, if you're familiar with that part of Atlanta. Anyway, he left his restaurant to, as I understand it, run the cafeteria at Home Depot. So my question for you is how great, and he used to have a great restaurant. How great is and Billy has probably been, I think he's left that restaurant, it's probably been a decade, maybe 15 years. But I'm guessing you guys are eating pretty good. If he's anything, even though he's doing it on an industrial level, he was very good at that restaurant.
Yep. And our cafeteria is amazing.
That's what I thought. Because if it's anything like the food that Billy used to serve in Buckhead.
Yep. And he is still there, by the way. So he is still running it.
Oh, do you know who I'm talking about then?
Oh,
right?
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. That's my boy, Billy. Yeah, absolutely. Great guy. Yep. Okay. Sorry for the weird question,
Nope.
but I just had to ask. Yeah.
Quite all right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Shanika, anything you want to close up with?
No, any other questions, anyone? If not, I posted some links. So thank you again, Emily, for speaking through this. I think it was very helpful. I know for me too, for a developer, I'm always trying to think like, how can I actually try to help out on a product end? Because it's kind of sometimes just sitting back and maybe not, I don't know, it's more like sitting back and just doing the dev stuff. But I posted your LinkedIn again for folks that may want to connect. I also shared some links for Bdpa for those that this may be your first time. So if you want to also connect with us on LinkedIn, you can do that, and our other social media. But thanks everyone for joining, and hope to see you in December. December 15th is our next session. We should have posts for that coming up soon. But thanks everyone. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.